Chair Anderson, you can go ahead and start. We are live.
All right, thank you very much, Becca. So I don't have my gavel with me here, but I will call this meeting of the Mission Fulfillment Committee of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents to order. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to those who are joining us via the live stream video. We are all on live stream today. Before we turn our agenda, I do want to welcome the student representatives. I think they're both here. Abdullah Ali and JL Karande. Thank you for being with us. Finally, one last little portion of business I'm going to insert in here. With regional elections coming up, this is probably the last board meeting for three of us regents. And I know Regent Beeson was a mentor to me, and it will be his last meeting. And Regent Simonson, we got to know each other when we ran, and we got to know each other working on the board. You both have done a tremendous job for the University of Minnesota, and I want to commend you for your service to the state. I also feel a little uncomfortable saying goodbye to myself, but I want you to know that I've cherished the opportunity to be a representative of the University of Minnesota. It's an institution that has meant so much in my life. I'm also just really humbled to know that I was granted the responsibility and the privilege. And I've always prayed that my service to the university would be commensurate with the responsibility and privilege entrusted to me. I hope I've met that goal. Finally, I just want to thank you and say thanks to everybody on campus that I've met over the years for the courtesies and the friendships that they've extended to me during this time. Thank you very much. Now we're going to get to work. As Regent Svigum has told me, there's a Gopher basketball game on TV shortly, and we want to be done so we can watch that. So today's agenda in mission fulfillment deals with diversity in many parts. And we're going to start out with item number 1, which is diversity in system-wide admissions and recruitment. The first item is this discussion on diversity in system-wide admissions and recruitment. We'll be joined by Melissa Burt, Interim Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Manager at the Morris campus, Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education, Bob McMaster, one of the guys that I really miss not seeing by being virtual, and Jeffrey Ratcliffe Crane, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Innovation at the Rochester campus. Before I turn it over to our presenters, President Gable and Provost Croson are going to provide introductory remarks. President Gable, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. And may I just say, as a follow-up to my earlier comments in your opening remarks, that when I had the distinct honor of being inaugurated as the 17th president of the university, I could think of no better story to tell than yours about how this university saved you with its innovative health sciences research, and we loop back to your remarkable service and commitment to governing this institution so that the very same thing can happen for generations to come. So thank you for everything you've done and for being such a great ambassador, steward, and friend to me and to the university. So with that said, all of the presentations for today's meeting are themed, as you described, around diversity, equity, and inclusion across the system, specifically related to recruitment and academic success of our undergraduate and graduate students across the system, with particular note that that is not the only way or reason or method or point of view from which we would look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, but just for the purposes of today's discussion, there is a focus. This work is guided through the commitment to promoting student success, which is in our MPACT 2025 strategic plan, which states that we would meet all students where they are and maximize their skills, potential, and well-being in a rapidly changing world. We're really humbled and glad to do this shared work in support of our mission to be equitable, diverse, and inclusive. It's highlighted also in our commitment to community and belonging. And despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, we're also really proud of our work as a system to enroll the largest class of Minnesota freshmen and the highest percentage of students of color in half of a century. That doesn't mean we don't have more work to do. In fact, we do, and that's why we are overtly making these commitments through the strategic plan consider our conversation today to be an update on where we are and a reflection and acknowledgement of the work that we need to do going forward. So Provost Croson and our presenters will directly connect our MPACT 2025 commitments and goals with some specific examples, particularly in anticipation of our discussion of metrics tomorrow. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Provost Croson to introduce our speakers and continue the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Provost Croson, the floor, the video stream is yours.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. Thank you, President Gabel. I want to reiterate President Gabel's thanks to the members of this board who may be transitioning between now and our next committee meeting, with a special thanks to Regent Tom Anderson, whose guidance and leadership has been so impactful for me as I began this position in such unusual circumstances. So thank you so much. This first presentation focuses on undergraduate enrollment management across the 5 system campuses and provides examples of the type of data we look at to monitor diversity, as well as a few illustrative examples of steps that each campus is taking to enhance opportunity and access for all, regardless of identity. If we can go to the first slide, please. There are a set of examples in your docket, and the presenters will highlight a very few in their presentation. But even the list in the docket is far from a full inventory of the countless efforts and activities we undertake. Our objective with this approach is to give you an understanding of the types of efforts and work going on, rather than a long list without context. We have 3 presenters today from 3 different campuses. Dr. Burt is the Interim Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at the Morris campus. She's been in that role since July 2019. She concurrently serves as the Senior Director of Institutional Effectiveness at Morris and has held that position since fall 2015. You know, of course, that Dr. McMaster is the Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education on the Twin Cities campus. He's been in that role since 2008. And of course, he's a proud geographer. He's been professor of geography at the university since 1989 and served as chair of geography from 2005 to 2008. Dr. Radcliffe Crane is vice chancellor for academic affairs and innovation at the Rochester campus, and he's been in that role since fall 2018. Previously, he was a professor of psychology at the Morris campus from 1989 to 2013. And is a member of the Academy of Distinguished Teachers. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I want to echo President Gabel's comments, which highlighted the prominent role that diverse student enrollments have in the system-wide strategic plan. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the first goal associated with Commitment 1 in the strategic plan is to attract, educate, and graduate students who represent the diversity, talent, workforce, and citizenship needs of the future. One corresponding metric is to establish a comprehensive system-wide strategic enrollment management strategy, which aligns with the past and future work of the vice provosts and vice chancellors across our system who you'll be hearing from today. The information you'll be seeing today will be a pivotal input as we develop that strategy. The first goal for Commitment 4 is to recruit and retain diverse talent. And one proposed measure is to increase the percentage of underrepresented undergraduate students in the freshman class year over year. The presenters, along with their colleagues, have the ultimate responsibility for meeting these benchmarks. Chair Anderson, and with your approval, I'd like to ask Vice Chancellor Burt to get the group started.
She has the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the board for this opportunity to speak briefly about diversity in system-wide admissions and recruitment. I'd like to start by acknowledging that there are many ways that diversity can be defined. When we think about diversity, some areas that we can consider include race and ethnicity, gender, geographic differences, diversity of thought, and differences in socioeconomic background. Our presentation today will speak to some of these definitions, but there are many more which could have been included for discussion. In terms of admissions and recruitment, each of our campuses is highly attentive to the need to craft classes that reflect the rich fabric of our society as a whole. Each admissions office considers the individual contributions that students from varied backgrounds can make to the campus community as part of their larger holistic evaluation process. We will begin our presentation with an overview of campus-wide and system-wide data. These slides focus on first-generation students, Pell Grant recipients, geographic diversity, and racial and ethnic diversity. Due to time constraints, we are essentially hitting the high points. There are a wide range of other diversity metrics that are monitored on our various campuses. Next slide, please. This slide graphically displays, both for the system as a whole and for individual campuses, the percentage of the undergraduate student population that will be the first in their family to complete a bachelor's degree. Over the last 5 years, the percentage of first-generation students has declined slightly across the system, as well as at the Duluth, Morris, and Twin Cities campuses. Rochester enrolled an increasing percentage of first-generation students through fall 2019 and saw a slight dip in fall 2020. At Crookston, percentages have increased over time. Looking at fall 2020, across the system, 27% of our undergraduate students identify as first generation. 24% of the undergraduates enrolled at the Twin Cities campus fall into this category. At Duluth, Morris, and Rochester, about a third of undergraduates will be the first in their family to graduate with a 4-year degree. At Crookston, a full 50% of their undergraduates identify as first generation. Vice Chancellor Ratliff Crane will discuss some of the factors that influenced this increase at Crookston later in the presentation. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates the percentage of undergraduates that received the Pell Grant between fall 2016 and fall 2020. Over the last 5 years, the percentage of Pell recipients has declined slightly across the system, as well as at the Duluth and Twin Cities campuses. The percentage of students receiving Pell Grants has consistently been higher at the Crookston, Morris, and Rochester campuses. Morris and Crookston have experienced slight variability over the last 5 years, hovering around a third of all undergraduates. As you can see, Rochester has experienced a steady increase in the percentage of students receiving Pell Grant aid on their campus. In fall 2020, system-wide, 20% of students are Pell recipients, while about 20% of the students enrolled at Duluth and Twin Cities campuses were awarded a Pell Grant. Slightly less than a third of students enrolled at Crookston and Morris received this form of need-based aid. And 38% of Rochester's undergraduate population received a Pell Grant. I now turn this over to Vice Provost McMaster, who will continue our discussion of diversity-related data.
Great, thank you, Melissa. I'd like to pick up on the topic of geographic diversity in my section and a few other topics. First, I wanted to thank also Regent Anderson for his service. I very much enjoyed working with him over the last 6 now, and in particular, the wonderful trip to Alexandria High School we made several years ago to visit that facility. So best of luck to you. Picking up on the topic of diversity broadly defined, this chart that you're looking at for the 5 campuses, the geographic diversity is for the fall 2020 enrollment, total enrollment on the campus. The geographic makeup of each of the campus undergraduates changes significantly across the system, as you can see here. Overall, 82% of the undergraduates are from the state of Minnesota, either from the Twin Cities or greater Minnesota. 13% are reciprocity students, mostly from Wisconsin. 8% are from other states, what we call NRNR, and 6% are international, again, across the system. Of course, the total system numbers are heavily skewed by the Twin Cities data on these charts, on the system chart. As we look at system trends, you can see that the Twin Cities campus has the higher percentage of Metro students at 55% and a lower Greater Minnesota percentage at 14%. However, Greater Minnesota students are well served in the system numbers, Each of the system campuses, as would be expected, have much higher percentages of Greater Minnesota students, with UMD at 38%, Crookston at 39%, Morris at 46%, and Rochester at 42%. Reciprocity students have always contributed significantly to the U of M enrollment. We're quite unusual nationally, in fact, in having this arrangement. The number of reciprocity students is fairly consistent across the system, ranging from 14% on the Twin Cities campus to 10% on the Morris campus. Both Crookston and Morris have a higher percentage of students from the Dakotas, again, as one would expect. Finally, the international enrollments vary from a high of 8% on the Twin Cities campus to 1% at Duluth. As you realize, international enrollments at the freshman level dropped significantly in fall 2020 based on the constraints imposed by the pandemic. Next slide. As with geography, enrollment of students of color and American Indian student varies considerably across the system. Overall, 68% of the undergraduate students identify as white. The campus percentages reach a high at UMD at 84% white and a low at Morris with 56% white. The next largest category, Asian, varies from 17% at Rochester to 3% at Morris. In Minnesota, of course, the large Hmong population would fall into the Asian category. One can see the same variation with Black students, where Rochester currently has 13% Black students and Duluth has 3%. Twin Cities undergraduate Black population has grown from about 4% to the most recent 7%. The Latinx Hispanic population is mostly consistent, mostly ranges at from 2% to 5%, with a high percentage at Rochester at 8%. In particular, in parts of southern Minnesota, the Latinx population is growing quickly, as we know. Perhaps the most significant variation can be seen with the American Indian population in green on the bar chart, which varies from a low of 1% on the Twin Cities campus to a high of 27% on the Morris campus. As the board knows, Morris provides free tuition to American Indian students from throughout the United States. Next slide. An interesting way to look at the significant overlap among students of color, first generation, and Pell students is with the system-wide Venn diagram. 11% of the undergraduates are students of color and American Indian only. That's in the southwest kind of whitish circle in the Venn diagram. 11% are first generation only in the southeast circle, pinkish, and 5.6% are Pell only in the blue north circle. At the center of the Venn diagram, 6% of students system-wide identify in all three categories. As we have learned from much research, the sector with both first generation and Pell in the purple segment represents a particularly vulnerable subgroup in terms of retention and student success. As we design student success initiatives, it is helpful to identify those students that fall into one or more of these categories. I'll now turn it over to Jeff Ratcliffe Crane to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Bob, and also thank you to Chair Anderson, members of the committee. So what are the University of Minnesota campuses doing to respond to shifting demographics and to lead on diversifying our enrollments? As noted, on every campus, there are nearly countless strategies deployed to shape diverse student enrollment. Broadly, these fall within and among building relationships, communications and targeted messages, focus on geographic areas and groups and regions, targeted visits and hosting days, scholarships, pathways and opportunities, working with community partners, and developing the personnel and budgetary resources to support these efforts. As noted again, constraints don't allow for an exhaustive list now or even in your docket, although there are additional examples highlighted there. Today, we will highlight just one example from each campus to provide a glimpse of the comprehensive approaches our campuses undertake to work toward diversity in enrollment and thus equitable, diverse, and inclusive campus communities. Next slide, please. The University of Minnesota Crookston recruitment story is shaped in significant ways by first-generation college students. The figure included in the slide is the same as slide 4 that Vice Chancellor Burt presented. The steady increase in the proportion of first-generation college students choosing to attend at Crookston, rising from 39% to 50%, is notable in contrast with the system as a whole. Marketing and messaging has highlighted the recognition of University of Minnesota Crookston as a member of the Center for First Generation College Student Successes 2019 inaugural cohort of First Gen Forward institutions. The next presentation includes graphs showing UMC's success with these students in closing gaps in achievement. A key challenge facing University of Minnesota Crookston's First Gen Forward efforts relate to situating those efforts within the Student Success Center, also launched in 2019. In light of budgetary restrictions and the Retirement Incentive Offer program, staffing for the Student Success Center was cut by 35%. While this resulted in over $300,000 in salary savings, it compromises capacity to capitalize on First Gen Forward opportunities and continue student success efforts. Next slide, please. With the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and limits to in-person recruiting and campus visits, the Duluth campus introduced new targeted virtual visit days. For example, the Multicultural Virtual Experience Day, noted here, occurred on November 18th in 2020. A collaboration with the St. Paul Public Schools Advancement via Individual Determination, or AVID program, and the UMD Office of Diversity and Inclusion provided a very intentional event to prospective students of color. Total registrants, 47, including 16 high school seniors, also included students of color outside of the AVID program. Elements of the day included connecting with current UMD students of color, attending a financial aid presentation, including FAFSA preparation, a UMD application workshop, and a live virtual campus tour. As reported in today's Insight Higher Ed, the number of high school seniors completing U.S. financial aid forms has dropped 10% in year-by-year comparisons, with students from disadvantaged programs disproportionately affected, highlighting the importance of active outreach programs such as this. Next slide, please. The Morris transfer student population has historically contributed to the campus's diversity. In fall 2020, over 50% of transfer students were from racial and ethnic groups historically underserved in higher education or were international students. The Morris campus has created an Office of Transfer Student Services, with its inaugural director initiating work just this past month in January 2021. The development of the Office of Transfer Student Services reflects a prioritization of both increased recruitment of transfers and enhanced support once they matriculate. Although TSS supports all transfer students, the director is already working on building relationships with Minnesota tribal colleges, including White Earth Tribal and Community College. A project to develop collaborative programming between University of Minnesota Morris and other Minnesota tribal colleges is supported by a recently awarded Native American Serving Non-Tribal Institutions, or NASANTI grant. These initiatives will encourage an increased number of students from tribal colleges to transfer to University of Minnesota Morris after completion of their associate's degree. The NASANTI Cooperative Grant with Fond du Lac, Leech Lake, and Red Lake Nation College is in its infancy. The 5-year grant was just awarded in fall of 2020, but the goal is collaboration to provide students with clear pathways to and through bachelor degree completion at University of Minnesota Morris. Next slide, please. The Rochester slide highlights another example where a campus program focused on relationships through building student cohorts while also providing appropriate levels of financial and other supports can have an overall positive impact on both recruitment and diversifying student enrollment. As noted in the docket, the UMR story regarding strong recruitment of first-generation college students, Pell-eligible students, and BIPOC students is less a specific initiative or program and more of an ongoing comprehensive strategy through word-of-mouth reputation building to build relationships. We continue to expand those efforts. The Health Corps Living Learning Community with its accompanying 4-year scholarship is one element of that broader strategy. CORE stands for Community of Respect and Empowerment, by the way. As a living learning community, students live together in the same residence floor, are expected to engage with campus and community, are provided networking opportunities, and have a dedicated student success coach. We have dedicated our top scholarship for Health Corps students. Students apply for this competitive program and are selected from participants in our annual Health Scholars Day based on their passion for healthcare and commitment to engage with the Health Corps Living Learning community. To be eligible, students need to fall into at least one of the traditionally underserved groups of first-generation college student, Pell eligible, and/or student of color. The 2016 class was the first cohort and will have over a 70% graduation rate once the one remaining student graduates this spring. 25% of the 2017 cohort graduated in fewer than 3 years, and we've had a 95% retention rate in first to second year in the latest cohort. This model is helping us form other cohort and LLC models. I'd like to turn the University of Minnesota Twin Cities summary over to Vice Provost McMaster.
Thank you, Jeff. In the docket material, the UMTC discussed 2 of our recruitment initiatives, those for students of color and American Indian students in the Twin Cities metropolitan area, and our efforts in the recruitment of Greater Minnesota students. In this presentation, we will focus on the Greater Minnesota efforts. The average Greater Minnesota student can receive an average of 125 touch points, emails, and paper per year from their sophomore to their senior years. With about 14,000 Greater Minnesota students in this space, we created approximately 1.75 million communications in the last calendar year in total. As can be seen on this slide, the UMTC admissions office has myriad efforts in this recruitment space. Some of these include Greater Minnesota high school visits and college fairs, for summer 2020 virtual campus visits, email outreach, and student calling outreach. As an aside, obviously over the last year, there were some dramatic changes that were necessary in terms of our outreach efforts, migrating mostly from an in-person to a virtual format. We also increased our engagement with Greater Minnesota high school counselors, a primary supporter of students outside of their family. This critical audience was able to attend one of the Greater Minnesota high school counselor events at far greater numbers than ever before. We saw an average of 20 attendees online versus an average of 50 at the in-person events. Students from Greater Minnesota are present in all programs at the university. There's a sense that Greater Minnesota students all migrate to CFANS, which is not true. Land Grant Legacy Scholars, it's a program designed specifically for Greater Minnesota students in CFANS. This program provides scholarships to about 20 first-year students per year. In fact, over the 4 years that Land Grant Legacy students study here, they will receive $20,000 each in scholarship funding. It's been a big lift for recruiting, although a small number of students. Next slide. On this slide, we provide a brief summary of the 2018 Board of Regents resolution on UMTC undergraduate diversity. Each year we come back to give a report on that. As you'll remember, there were 3 components to the resolution: increased recruitment, especially in the Twin Cities metropolitan region, improved 4- and 6-year graduation rates, and improving campus climate scores as measured by the student experience in the research university, the CERU scores. In terms of increased recruitment, the global pandemic resulted in a decrease in campus visits from March 2020 to December 2021. The 2 tables that we provided in the docket material indicate that for 2020, data were not really available comparable, given that most of the interactions with multicultural students shifted to a virtual mode. For instance, we used to have an Experience Minnesota Day that would bring hundreds of multicultural students to Northrop Auditorium and then to spend a day on campus in the month of normally September, October. And of course, that big event, big recruitment event had to be canceled, and we did the best we could in a virtual format. For graduation rates gaps, the UMTC continued to make improvements with both the 4- and 6-year graduation rates as seen in the charts in your docket. The one anomaly can be found with the American Indian 4-year graduation rate, which dropped significantly for the 2016 class. This rate has more variability than the others due to the small number of American Indian students. The drop, however, was preceded by a record rate over 70% 4-year rate for the 2015 class. So again, wild oscillations, significant oscillations in that particular curve you'll see. We're monitoring that particular population and their success very carefully, of course. There are no new SARO data to report on campus climate since the survey was canceled in spring 2020. Thus, the data reported to the board in February 2020 are the most recent available and indicate a slight uptick in campus climate scores over previous years. We will be giving the undergraduate SARO again this spring. In fact, it launches in March, and so we should have a whole new set of scores available sometime over the summer, and can make sure we update those charts. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation back to Provost Croson.
Thank you, all of the presenters. Wonderful job. For our board members, I hope what you take away from this presentation is that our campus leaders consider diversity in many ways, that we monitor our levels continuously, and that robust efforts are in place across the university on every campus to ensure that our education is accessible and to recruit and attract students that will shape a student body that reflects the rich diversity of our state, our nation, and the world. Chair Anderson and members of the board, we welcome your questions and comments.
Terrific. Oh, thank you for putting the screen out. I now can see if somebody has a raised hand, and I see that the esteemed Regent Sviggum would like to ask a question. Go ahead, Regent Sviggum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm calling from cold southern Minnesota. Well, not really. My question is this, Mr. McMaster or Dr. McMaster, I think I always ask you unfair questions. I believe I do. I put you on the spot and ask you unfair questions many, many times, and I'm not going to stop doing that. I'm going to ask you this. I want you to bring out your crystal ball, Bob, and I want you to be the benevolent dictator of University of Minnesota student population, following the values of the university, the values set out by the university and by the regents. Go back to one of the screens and give me the quote perfect mix of students that you think there ought to be. Now, it might be more first generation students, which might mean some less other type of students. It might mean more Minnesota kids whose parents pay the bill, by the way, or much of the bill, which means less international students. It might be more Pell eligible students. It might be more students of color. It might be more international students who pay NRNR, who we like to get the money from. Give me the perfect mix, Bob, in relationship to the pie of students. I'm not going to let you have the pie get bigger. You're not going to be able to tell me, well, we want more of this type of student, more of that type. I want the pie to stay the same. 66,000 students. Give me the perfect mix.
That's a tough question of Vice Provost McMaster, but I will let him try to give it an answer.
Chair Anderson and Regent Sviggum, there is a perfect mixture. It would be 100% geography majors who come into the institute. And so, do I need to proceed after that? You want a deeper answer?
Probably not.
Okay. Here's how I think we view this.
And Bob,
I do have some thoughts on this. Yes.
Please. As you know, I'm getting to the point that if we're going to admit one type of student, we're probably not going to admit somebody else. Now, it might be international, it might be a diverse student, it might be somebody who's first gen, but if we're going to admit student X, we're probably not going to admit student Y. Give me the perfect mix.
Okay. There are a set of orthogonal variables that I think we have to look at with this. One would be the total enrollment. So I'm going to leave the total enrollment flat as you requested. And as we think about the geographic diversity, I'll start with that. And I'm gonna focus on the freshman class now. We basically target 65% Minnesota. We target 15% reciprocity. We target 15% NRNR, and we target 5% international, with some variation, plus or minus on every one of those. So as we go into the enrollment season every year, that's kind of a rough guideline for the geographic diversity that we try to obtain. On occasion, we come very close. Most years, we're probably off. For instance, last year, as you know, we were significantly under with NRNR and with international. We were significantly over with Minnesota and a bit over with reciprocity. If I look at race and ethnicity, that's a really tough one, in that you're not allowed by law to have targets for racial ethnic groups. You do this by what I think, getting back to your point, what are the values of the institution? The way I view this, and the admissions team looks at this, and I think my boss, the provost, agrees with this, is we really have to look at the pool. And what is the pool we're drawing from in shaping our diversity? And so each year when we shape our class in terms of percent African American, percent Native American, percent Latinx, I like to go back and compare those numbers to what is our Minnesota pool, and to make sure that we're not, certainly not significantly underrepresenting that pool. And there'd be those that would argue that if we do a bit better than the Minnesota pool, that's terrific. And so, for instance, this year in the freshman class, we had, I think, 27% students of color and American Indian students, BIPOC. That was almost spot on with Minnesota high school graduates. Now, we didn't use that as the lever to admit or not admit students. It just was a rough guideline. So with geographic diversity, we kind of have those percentages that I've talked about before in the Twin Cities enrollment plan. For race and diversity, I think about it in terms of the pools we draw from. In terms of first gen and Pell, I'd make the same argument. We want to make sure we're the flagship institution in the state, that we're reflecting within reason. Obviously, you're not going to hit these spot on. You're reflecting those percentages in the high school population. I think that's about the best I can do.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that good enough, Regent Sviggum?
Well, I think Bob did very, very well. Obviously, we could get more sensitive in some of the questions as who we leave in and who we leave out. But I think, Mr. McMaster, you and I have had a conversation about before, and we'll probably continue.
Thank you. We're going to go, just so we know, we have Regent Powell, Regent Hsu, and Regent Her. Regent Powell, if you'd like to ask your question, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Bob, just a bit of a variation on Regent Sviggum's question, and it's more along the lines of, looking at the data, and I think we're making progress. It's slow progress, but it's steady, and I do think this is a long game, exercise. So you just have to be patient and keep going at it, and so I'm encouraged by some of these numbers. Having said that, if as you think about the data, colleagues, if there's one metric or here that makes you wince, or makes you feel, God, we just really are going to have to do better there, what would that be? That's one question. The other one is, I know that the purpose of this study is diversity as we're measuring it, but gender is still a critical metric for all the employers in the Twin Cities. They're really focused on women and developing women. So I guess the question is, will there be an opportunity to look at that, and in particular in women in engineering and science and technical supply chain? These are really crucial metrics for many of our corporate organizations in town. So those couple of questions for you.
Sure. Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, I'll take the latter question first, and that is, as the provost and I work with each one of the colleges in shaping their enrollment. Remember, we think of this as we're bringing in 6,000 freshmen a year and 2,000 transfers a year, which is true. But really what we're doing is we're shaping 8 freshmen admitting colleges. And we look very carefully at the gender data for each one of those colleges. So for instance, in the College of Nursing, they know that they have an imbalance with females and males. It's heavily female. With the College of Engineering, it's quite the opposite. And they're very well aware of this. And I think, for instance, in working with CSE, they've been able to increase their percent female in the freshman class from, I forget what the initial number was, but up to about 30%, which is, it's not 50%, but it's heading in a very good direction.
Yep.
So in terms of that metric, absolutely. We look at these data, we have them disaggregated and sliced and diced, and it's really, I think, at the college level where we try to shape that balance. In terms of the one metric, and there are actually 4 or 5 different metrics that make me edgy, but the one that I'll bring up today is Pell. I think we can and will do better in terms of bringing in Pell students. There are a number of University of Minnesota Foundation initiatives around enhancing the financial aid for low-income Pell students. I think the board's aware of several of these. And I think we have to pull that lever as hard as we can to make sure we have the resources so a student doesn't come to the University of Minnesota, any of our campuses, because they can't afford to.
That's great. Thanks, Vice Provost.
Thank you, Regent Powell, for the question. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. A lot of data here, but the data that I was looking for doesn't seem to be here, which is something that explains where we get to next. How many people apply? We know how many people came in. We know how many people did virtual visits. We know how many people got emails from us, but we don't know how many people applied, and we certainly don't know the mix of people who applied. So, and how many people did we accept in this category, or how many people did we decline, and what are their stats? And I just have a difficult time understanding exactly where we're going here because we're not given enough data to understand that. Thank you.
Who would like to try to answer that question for Regent Hsu? Or does that maybe just end up being a comment?
I'm happy to chime in, and of course, we track our funnel in terms of recruitments, applicants, complete applications, offers, and acceptances, and we can certainly break that down by whatever element of underrepresentedness you are interested in.
Thank you, Provost Grossen. I do want to let Student Representative Ali and Regent Mayron know that I do see their raised hands, and we'll go through the 2 of you eventually, and then we'll cut this session off. Regent Her.
Thank you. Thank you, presenters, for wonderful data. I have a question, and just sharing some of my thoughts with you on this. I do like where you're going, and like what Regent Chairman Powell said, I see us going in the right direction. I would, having worked in this area for so long, the dream is always, what is the end product? What is the end goal? And will we know when we get there? So I feel like we're striving somewhere. The legality of all this issue is iffy. You can't put any direct target. You just have to have a sense of a feel, in the sense is that right now there is inequity and there is a huge gap with regards to gender, income, and race of the students. So with that in mind, I am very interested in recruitment, not to recruit the students, but to recruit for success. And so I think this is a great first set of data. I would like to follow the data further, and President Gable and I've had discussions with regards to, we do admit the students, and we're keeping track of their retention, we're keeping track of their progress with regards to the campus climate, how they're doing. I'd like to track graduation rates, where do they go, where's the postgraduate. I think we have challenges in wanting to recruit postgrads, and we want to graduate more PhD, master's graduates, and we know that there is a huge disparity in that area too. And then following further by where are they placing, where are they working, and the income that they're getting, and are they giving, and are they part of the alumni? So a longer longitudinal study of that. When we say we're recruiting these students, are they doing well? And can we say, you come to the University of Minnesota, we want you, and we know that you will do well here because we have all these data sets. And so good job so far. I love where we're going with this, and looking forward to working with you all on the metrics. Thank you.
You know, Regent Her, that kind of just makes me think about, in our recruiting, you're kind of saying, and I agree with this, we need to recruit students for life. We need to have students that will be good alumni, good everything. And I think you're just saying, let's get a hold of all that data so we can find out who those students are. I think that's something that's maybe lost every once in a while. Although we have to remember, they can't be alumni until they've been students and get through and things like that. But I think that's a good point, that we don't think long enough. Student Representative Ali, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters. I just wanted to use my time to ask a couple questions in regards to how the university is addressing barriers of entry. Today, I heard a little bit about in the presentation in regards to how the university is reaching out to AVID students in the Twin Cities area, and I think that is great. I myself am a first-generation college student, a past AVID student, and a college possible participant. Without the financial assistance that was given to me by my past high school in waiving the application fee for me to apply to the University of Minnesota, as well as take the standardized testing to be admitted to the University of Minnesota, I don't know if I would be here. Diversity contributes to our university in various facets, right? And I just wanted to ask either Dr. McMaster or any of the other presenters, how is the university addressing some of these barriers of entry, such as cost and even applying, standardized testing? And I know that this conversation has previously happened, I believe in like the December meeting, and I just wanted to see if those conversations are still being addressed and talked about. Thank you.
Great question. And I think, I'll tell you, in my 6 years, it's really, really improved. I don't have all the answers, but Regent Croson, is that a question for you? Or Provost Croson?
I might ask Bob McMaster to talk about the various types of outreach we do to students who might have challenges in applying.
Vice Provost McMaster.
Sure, Chair Anderson, Representative Ali. I'm delighted to know that you didn't pay an application fee, because that's one of the very important mechanisms we use, is to push out free application to the University of Minnesota, and in particular to specific high schools and places around the Twin Cities. We also, our admissions team, I think, to get to your point, is very, very active in going out to high schools and recruiting students. And our one-stop counselors go out to help students with completing FAFSAs and other financial aid forms. Vice Chancellor Radcliffe Crane mentioned earlier the issue of FAFSA and the downtick in completion rates for FAFSA. We've seen that in this state as well, about a 10% downtick. Well, if a student doesn't complete a FAFSA, they are likely not coming to this university because they won't receive, or any university, because they won't receive financial assistance. So we try to be very proactive in educating high school students on the financial literacy aspects and the financial challenges of attending university. So it's through intensive outreach, it's through our PR, it's through our events that we have on campus. Our admissions office has a very keen sense of how to recruit, and I've been working with them for 14 years, so I truly believe this, how to recruit a diverse class broadly defined. And I mean low income, students of color, American Indian students, first generation, across the board.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster. Student Representative Ali, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I was hoping maybe you could touch on how the conversation is moving forward in regards to standardized testing.
Vice Provost McMaster, what do you know? Standardized testing.
Sure, Chair Anderson, Representative Ali. What's been decided is that, as you know, and I'm speaking for the Twin Cities now, although Rochester and Morris are aligned with the Twin Cities on this, and Duluth and Crookston might want to speak to their own testing decisions. We're test optional. The correct term here is actually not requiring a test. There's actually a difference between test optional and not requiring a test. So we're not requiring a test for fall 2021. A decision has been made with support from the Board of Regents and the President and the Provost to become, I'll just say, test optional for 2022. There still is uncertainty looking out whether we would continue to be test optional into the future. There's lots of decisions here in terms of what it contributes to our understanding, getting to the previous comment of student success. And there are many that believe the ACT, SAT does contribute knowledge that helps us determine whether a student will succeed here. So basically, short-term decisions have been made. Longer-term, jury's still out on where we are, and I'll let my other colleagues talk about that.
And the ACT is also just another data point. We're trying to get more and more data points. I think that helps. We're going to move on because we only got a couple minutes, and I see Regent Rocha's got his hand up. So I'm going to let Regent Mayron speak, and then we'll go to Regent Rocha, then we'll cut this session off.
Thank you. I have a question, Vice Provost McMaster, going to the race and ethnicity slide that you had. It was on page 24 of our materials. And I understand one of the things you look at, one of the metrics that you look at is how we're doing as compared to what the pool of students, the potential pool of students looks like who's coming out of our Minnesota high schools. And I understand that you said that right now we have approximately 27% non-white students that entered the class, and that compares pretty favorably with what the high school graduating class looked like for Minnesota. How does that break out with respect to the specific groups, in particular in terms of how we compared? We have 7% of our enrollment for Blacks, 7% or say 13% for Asian, 5% for Hispanic. How does that compare with what is coming, the pools are coming out of the Minnesota high school classes?
Vice Provost McMaster.
Right. Chair Anderson and Regent Mayron, I have some data here that might be helpful on those percentages. So I'll just read you some of those, and that might be helpful.
All right, thank you.
American Indian, 1.2%. Asian, 6.9%. African American, 9.9%. Hawaiian, 7.6%. White, 71.5%. And then there's a growing complication with all this, and it's a multi-race category, and that is 3%. So there's data problems in harmonizing the data we get with that multi-race category, two or more.
So it sounds like we don't have data on, if I understood you correctly, on Hispanics and how we're doing against the pool of Hispanics graduating from high school. Is that correct? Or did I miss, or did you say that?
I did not, and it's in the table, and I just happened to notice, I think there's an error in the table that I have because it says 1%, and that's not correct.
Okay.
Because in the state population, I happen to have those numbers as well, just by chance. The Latinx population in the state is 5.6%.
Vice Provost McMaster, you said
Thank you.
Hawaiian 7.1. Is that correct?
Yeah, couldn't be, can't be.
Yeah, no, that can't be correct either in terms of the table that I have here that I just pulled. So I should put this table away and send you a.
Steve, Regent Sviggum would like to work in our Hawaiian recruiting office.
I would appreciate getting that information. I would guess my other colleagues would as well, to see how we're doing vis-a-vis what our high school population looks like from which we're doing the recruiting.
Regent Rocha, we're going to go to you with the idea too, also that the next two sessions are on diversity too. But go ahead and ask your question here, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. And the challenge with this is when you aggregate data, you may solve this problem, but it kind of creates a new question. A couple things that I'd be interested in as we go forward. One is international. Within the international block, which is a pretty good percentage of our student population in normal years, I'd be interested in understanding what the diversity is within that group. That's a pretty large group. I think certainly having an international, a strong international presence on campus is great for all students and for our state, and creating those relationships. But also, I think the issue of gender had come up a little bit earlier. I would like to understand a little bit about how gender is impacted within different demographic groups, within different racial groups, because I have heard, out on the wire, concern that within certain groups, one gender does a lot, is better represented than another, and that trying to understand what that challenge is and what the impact on society, on our potential students might be, and see whether we can address some of those challenges. And then even within racial groups themselves, to say Asian students, for instance, it's a very, very large and diverse group of folks, and so you might have a recent immigrant community that's not getting much access at all, versus some groups that would be categorized as Asian, where doing exceptionally well. And so by just kind of lumping a lot of different folks together that may come from very different circumstances, we can kind of maybe even miss the opportunity to have that impact that we're seeking to have. So if we can do that. And the last thing I'll say is, and this goes across all groups, but I think maybe a little bit more in the category of white students, but geographic diversity. I'm very interested in the geographic diversity, particularly on the flagship campus, because we're seeing such an outmigration of students across the state, and to understand whether we're attracting students from all across the state to all of our campuses. So if we could have that again, try not to data to death, but Mr. Chair, that's it. I just wanted to say that kind of information would be really, really helpful to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I will, Regent Rocha, I will tell you that I am always concerned about that. And I know we have, I think it's a 14% student population of rural Minnesotans on the Twin Cities campus. And I'm one that doesn't think that's quite enough. But I will also say my 2 points here. I'm just going to say, I'm really excited about the Land Grant Legacy Scholarship, which goes out. I believe, Vice Provost McMaster, and you can just answer with an affirmative if this is right. We've probably reached our full cohorts in that, where we've got 4 years of 25 students getting $5,000 a year, because I know President Kaler funded it to the tune of like $500,000 a year. And I think we're probably into that 4th year by now, are we not?
That would be correct, that we have a full class. I just have to make one comment on the previous data because I detected the error that was causing the problems here. And that would be Regent Mayron, Latinx, Hispanic, and Hawaiian were transposed. So
I wondered about that.
So, but yeah, the land-grant legacy class is full. If we had 100 land-grant legacy scholarships, I think we could give them all away.
One final question of Vice Provost McMaster, and it's important to me because it can save students money when they go to school. Do we see students of color make use of PSEO and college in the schools as much as any other students?
No.
I think that is a great opportunity for us to save that community. In rural Minnesota, it saves students so much money by being able to go PSEO and college in the schools. So that's my final statement on that. I am going to move on to the next item, which is going to be entitled Student Success and Closing the Achievement Gap. And we're going to get the other two I don't want to call them rural Minnesota, but non-metro campuses represented here with Fernando Delgado, the Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Duluth campus, and John Hoffman, all the way from Crookston, although all the way online. It's not like all the way driving to Minneapolis. And we're going to keep Vice President McMaster with us. He gets no break. So Provost Croson, do you want to lead off into this item as we get going?
Yes, thank you. You go ahead and put up the slides, please. Chair Anderson and members of the committee, coming to Regent Herr's excellent point, which I really did not set up in advance, this presentation is going to highlight some of the gaps in undergraduate achievement that we track, as well as examples of steps we take to close those gaps. Like the previous presentation, it's important to note that this presentation in no way represents a comprehensive view. We track many types of gaps beyond those presented here, and the activities we'll discuss today are far from a full inventory of all the activity across the university that addresses achievement gaps. For example, presenters are going to highlight first-year retention as one important type of achievement gap, but there are many others that we monitor, some but not all of which are noted in your docket. Some examples of programs aimed at closing achievement gaps are noted in your docket as well, and the presenters will highlight a few here. But again, these are select examples rather than a full inventory of the countless efforts. We again have 3 presenters from 3 different campuses. I'll remind you that Dr. McMaster is the Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education on the Twin Cities campus. I'm grateful that he's willing to do double duty and return for the second agenda item. Dr. Hoffman is Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at the Crookston campus. He's been in that role since July 2018. He was previously the chair of the Department of Educational Leadership at California State Fullerton, which I'm sure he's remembering fondly right about now. And he's held faculty positions at Fullerton as well as the Long Beach campus. Being from Los Angeles, I can tell you those are beautiful, beautiful campuses. Most of you know that Dr. Delgado is Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the Duluth campus and has been in that role since 2016. I've saved him for last, however, because you may not know that he's recently been selected to serve as the next president of Lehman College, which is part of the City University of New York system.
Wow.
Fortunately for us, Fernando's appointment at Lehman does not begin until July. I know I speak for everyone on this call, and on behalf of Chancellor Black, all of your colleagues at Duluth and your friends in the Provost's office, the President's office, and on all of the university campuses, when I say congratulations, and thank you for all that you've given to the university and to Minnesota.
Thank you.
You can go ahead to the next slide. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I want to again call your attention to the system-wide strategic plan. Like the last presentation, this conversation aligns with the first commitment and its first goal. And one of the metrics for this goal specifically is to reduce gaps in graduation rates, specifically between Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students by 50% by 2025. And of course, the first goal for Commitment 4 is to recruit and retain diverse talent. Two metrics in this goal are relevant here: increasing retention of all underrepresented students year over year, and reducing disparities in graduation rates among underrepresented groups. These presenters, along with their colleagues, have frontline responsibility for implementing these commitments, these goals, and meeting these measures. Chair Anderson, with your approval, I would ask Vice Provost and Dean McMaster to begin the presentation.
You're certainly okay. Go ahead, Vice Provost McMaster.
Yes, Chair Anderson, members of the board. Although it seems obvious, each of the 5 University of Minnesota campuses places a high priority on closing and eliminating the achievement opportunity gaps that exist. Of course, the Minnesota K-12 system struggles with the same challenge, with significant gaps with many of the groups discussed here today. Many of the identity groups worth monitoring are included in your docket, although there are certainly many ways that the data are disaggregated and examined. In this presentation, we'll highlight a few examples of the achievement opportunity gaps in very simple expressions and graphs. The next few slides look at first-year retention, but please realize that campuses examine gaps in many other ways as well. For example, your docket considers 4-year and 6-year graduation rates in addition to the first-year retention rates that we'll examine next. Finally, as we proceed through the presentation, each campus will present one example of how we're working to enhance diversity at our institutions. Next slide. A major goal of all U of M campuses has been to reduce the achievement opportunity gap between Pell, low income, normally defined as an adjusted gross income of $50,000 or less, a family income of $50,000 or less, and non-Pell students. On the next 3 system-wide gap graphs that you're going to see, a 0% gap is noted with the black horizontal line. Curves above this line indicate the Pell, or first generation, or whatever variable, indicates the Pell retention rates exceed the non-Pell rates. Curves below this line indicate the non-Pell retention rates exceed the Pell rate. Obviously, our goal is to have these curves on the black line or above the black line. Overall, since 2015, as expected, the non-Pell rates for all campuses except Rochester exceed the Pell retention rates. At UMR, the Pell rate has consistently been above the non-Pell rate since 2016, great work by Rochester, and rose to a 19% difference with the most recent data. One can detect the slight improvement with most campuses, although system-wide, the gap has only risen from about -4 to -3 points over that period of time. Improving the first-year retention and graduation rates for Pell students has proven to be one of the most significant challenges in our student success initiatives. I'm now going to turn it over to John Hoffman to talk about first generation.
Thank you. As Vice Provost McMaster noted, the data points above the central black line indicate instances when first-year retention rates for first-generation college students outperformed their continuing generation peers. Some of the larger fluctuations in the lines reflect small sample sizes, and I'll note that there was one year when the University of Minnesota Crookston did not collect data for parental education from all of its applicants, feeding some of the fluctuation. That being said, the system-wide trend has been relatively steady over the past several years, and though there has been a slight decline over this time period, our performance is solid as a system when compared to national data for first-generation college students. That I'll pass things on to Dr. Delgado.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. This particular image shows us the now famous black line and the deviations above and below the black line. I'd point out here a couple of things. You see fluctuations for most of the campuses and some stability, particularly with Duluth, although we're not above the line. A consideration here for BIPOC students is not just simply whether or not these lines above and below on the achievement gap are related to academic achievement, but also related to social adjustment. And here this is important because each of the campuses in our system is so radically different from each other in terms of size and scale, but also in terms of resident versus non-resident components. A second consideration here beyond the academics is the communities in which we're situated in. All of us receive anecdotal and other kinds of data that suggests that students can struggle not just with the adjustment to campus, but the adjustment to the community. And while these things are extraneous beyond our control, each of our campuses works hard within our various communities to make sure that those transitions are as positive as they can be, and that we learn from the community and help educate the community so that the communities in which we're embedded can be hospitable to our students both on campus and off. And I guess I'll turn it back to, I think, John.
So with the next slide, okay. Research addressing student persistence and success in higher education, as well as the efforts to close opportunity and achievement gaps, has consistently indicated that student success is influenced by a vast array of efforts connected to academic achievement, holistic student development, and students' experience with the campus climate, as Dr. Delgado alluded to. Thus, our best practices aim to draw connections and create networks that help students to navigate complex higher education institutions. For the purpose of this presentation, we will highlight just one program or initiative at each campus, though collectively they reflect the breadth of our efforts with multiple populations on our campuses. Personally, I believe these are among our most exciting initiatives on our campuses because enhancing student success and promoting greater equity and inclusion strengthens everything that we do at our 5 campuses and as a system. Next slide, please. Over the past 10 years, the University of Minnesota Crookston has experienced a persistent and significant 14% first-year retention rate gap between BIPOC and white students. The 6-year graduation rate gap over the past 10 years for these two groups has been approximately 17.5%, which means that the largest portion of our graduation rate gap emerges in the first year. And I might note, alluding to the previous presentation and comments by Regents Hsu and Regents Her, I had a conversation just this morning about how we are beginning to track the process from applicant to admit to matriculant to retention to graduation rates, ensuring that not only do our applicant pools and entering classes represent the diversity of Minnesota, but our graduates need to represent the current and future demographics of our state. Gaps that exist, such as the one we have at Crookston, are not acceptable, and this was a primary driving force behind the implementation of first-year seminar courses. After the first year of implementation of these courses on our campus, the results are promising as the 13.8% gap was narrowed to 7.7%. The required 2-course sequence, which we are using as our HLC Persistence and Completion Academy project, is required for all new incoming students, high school students. In the fall semester, students complete a 2-credit Introduction to College Life course. The course includes modules addressing academic study skills, health and wellness, managing stress, building healthy relationships, career exploration, and financial wellness. The course also includes core academic experiences and a culminating signature assignment that address diversity, equity, and belonging. Faculty who teach the course grade the final signature assignment on a common rubric, which enables us to assess across all sections. In the spring, students complete a 1-credit Topics in Critical Thinking course based on current societal or social issues that have included racial equity, sustainability, food insecurity, world hunger, agronomy and GMOs, and sports and social justice. A core element of the first-year seminar course is their connection to our new Student Success Center, which we launched in 2019. The director of this center holds bi-weekly professional learning community meetings with all instructors who teach the courses, and the first topic of discussion is concerns about students in the classes. Thus, our director is able to gather data about every first-year student on a bi-weekly basis to help inform early outreach and intrusive advising efforts. Instructors also use these courses to discuss instructional strategies, challenges, and resources to strengthen the courses and the experience for our students. And next, I'll pass things back to Dr. Delgado.
Thank you, John. At Duluth, and perhaps addressing your questions and concerns, Regent Anderson, about what happens in high school and how does that play with how students come to the university, faculty in the math department, the mathematics and statistics department at UMD developed a MOOC. It is, as a MOOC has always suggested, a math class that is open to many students, but it is targeted at those high school students before they arrive at UMD to prepare them for the levels of math necessary to succeed. This is a key component for Duluth since so many of our students are in STEM or STEM-related majors, not only in the College of Science and Engineering, but also in other areas like the College of Education and Human Services Professions, the School of Business and Economics, and even in the College of Liberal Arts. In fact, upwards of 60% of our students are likely enrolled as a major or second major in a STEM-related discipline. The purpose of the MOOC isn't to solve every problem, but it is designed to help students use that summer before they enter in college to polish up or raise their level of math expectations and skills, and thus to transition into their entry-level math courses wherever they are situated to be successful. This is important in the first semester because if they're not successful in their math classes, particularly in STEM majors, they're likely not also going to make any progress in their other courses that leverage math requirements. And these would include computer science, electrical engineering, physics, accounting, finance, economics, and chemistry. In addition to the MOOC, more recently, other faculty, predominantly in chemistry and other science-related areas, have developed through a grant this Peer Up online mentoring program. This helps with the further adjustment to college life, which is so important and critical to some students, particularly those who come from underserved and underrepresented populations. The Peer Up online mentoring program and an associated camp allow the students an even deeper dive into the math and other kinds of science-related educational experiences, but also helps them prepare for the social and psychological adjustments of the university, the pace of learning, and the climate on campus. The bottom line is it helps them understand the unwritten rules of higher education that are oftentimes not taught to students and are a struggle for first-generation students to learn and adapt to. Next slide, please. At Morris, they've employed a Student Success Center. As we noted, students don't just fail because of academic reasons, but their academics can suffer from a myriad of reasons that are related to the classroom and beyond the classroom. For Morris, this has led to an integrated and comprehensive approach that is organized through the Student Success Center. The idea is to provide institution-wide support for students facing both the academic and the non-academic challenges associated with attending the University of Minnesota Morris. The creation of the Student Success Center advances the efforts to do just that, to do a better job of providing coordinated, intentional support for all students. At Morris, they know that the university will be successful if they can get students to find their way to the many people and offices that are there to support them, both academically and non-academically. We also know that sometimes students fall through the cracks, and not having a safety or a web there to support them means that it will be that much more difficult for them to successfully navigate the collegiate experience. At a campus where retention, to echo what Regent Mayeron said, is so critical to the success of the institution, having a program like the Student Success Center creates that foundation and that safety support that is necessary to identify, to connect, and to support the student as they navigate their transition to the University of Minnesota Morris. Next slide. At the University of Minnesota Rochester, the focus there is on advising and student support. Again, the goal is to create other kinds of experiences beyond the academic. In this case, intrusive advising, but also related in human connection points so that students feel supported as well as coached through their academic and university experience. UMR utilizes the Student Success Coach model for all students, including a focus on a holistic advising model that is not only academic advising, but also career advising and life coaching. Students have the same coach for all 4 years at a less than 1:100 ratio, and they provide to their students relational and intrusive advising. And as my colleague would say from Rochester, all of this in a good way. Coupled with a just ask model for faculty to provide academic support and feedback rather than office hours, all students therefore have ready access to academic and other support structures in a relational model. With the just ask model, faculty go to where students are in designated areas where students already gather to study, meet, etc. This visible, open, and accessible strategy for providing academic assistance reduces barriers for engaging with faculty and fellow students on course-related topics and questions. As you can see in these three models, along with what has already been presented by Crookston, each campus takes a different but comprehensive approach to understanding the success of the students in and beyond the classroom. And now I'll turn it back over to Vice Provost McMaster.
Thank you, Fernando. In the fall of 2020, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities launched the Gopher Equity Project, an educational experience for undergraduate students to promote a welcoming community that values belonging, equity, diversity, and dignity in people and ideas. This effort is one step in creating a positive campus climate for all students to thrive and succeed. The Gopher Equity Project consists of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Students EverFi online module. We have our freshmen take a series of these EverFi modules. One is on alcohol use and abuse, for instance, in the fall. This is a new one that we gave. This module is available to all undergraduate students and required for incoming first-year students beginning last fall 2020. Discussion groups or follow-up experiences are provided to encourage dialogue regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, and the Gopher Equity Project webpage contains additional resources for further reading and action if the student wants to pursue some additional material. By the end of fall, there are 10,697, let's say 11,000 individuals participated in the online training, including 4,854 of our first year students and 5,581 other undergraduate students. 262 faculty, staff, and graduate students participated in the small group experiences that are also part of the Gopher Equity Project. After completing the online training, 92% of students reported improved knowledge about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and 88% indicated an increased interest in learning more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next slide. In the previous presentation, we showed the board a Venn diagram with the overlapping enrollments system-wide for students of color, first generation, and Pell students. This Venn diagram uses the same three categories for Twin Cities data, but also shows the first year retention rates in these overlapping circles. In the northwest corner of the slide, the first year retention rates are provided for the white student enrollment. This currently stands at a little over 94% for last fall. The Pell only rate in the north circle in blue is 93.2%. The first generation only rate in the southwest corner is 91%. And the student of color rate in white is 94.3. Note that this SOC rate is just a bit higher than the white retention rate. And we've seen this fairly consistently over the last 4 to 5 years. The student of color first year retention rate first equaled the non-SOC rate and actually went above it for a couple of years. So we're very excited about that. The lowest rate, 87.9, is noted in the purple sector at the intersection of first generation and Pell. But note the 94.0 first year retention rate at the center where all three groups intersect. There's a lift when you add in the student of color retention rates. As before, these data help to establish priorities for student support and success in realizing where we can identify the most vulnerable populations. And first year retention is one of the critical first measures. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation back to Provost Croson.
Great. Again, my thanks to all the presenters and congratulations again to Vice Chancellor Delgado. The message that I hope is clear from this presentation is that we identify and track achievement gaps among different groups of students and at different times in their educational journey, and we monitor those gaps closely. Closing those gaps when they exist is a priority to which we hold ourselves accountable, and we've provided just a few examples of some of the ways that we work to do that. Chair Anderson and members of the board, we welcome your questions and comments.
Terrific. Great presentation. I really love those Venn diagrams. They really bring out the statistics and they're just interesting. So let's see who I have here. Okay, colleagues, they couldn't have done that good that nobody wants to ask a question, can they? Oh, there we go. We're going to start with Chairman Powell. Go ahead, Chairman Powell. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. And just a quick one, Provost Croson, maybe this one's for you. Very encouraged by the presentation and really appreciate the high level of innovation that we see across the campuses to try to address come up with ideas. The question I have is, when do you say centrally, gosh, this is such a good idea, this thing that they're doing at Morris or Crookston, we really should be applying that system wide? Or is the individual character of each campus, different enough that they really do need a highly tailored approach?
Provost Croson?
Yeah, great question. And so the answer is yes and yes. So absolutely, we learn from each other and we consider how things that have been successful could be maybe not applied directly, but adapted given the unique considerations for each campus. We also learn from our peers, right? We're constantly in contact with other universities, whether it's the Big Ten or small liberal arts colleges for Morris or peer institutions, because we recognize that there are some solutions that are likely to be maybe specific to particular contexts and that wouldn't apply across. So absolutely, we talk to each other all the time and we benchmark against peers and look for good ideas wherever we can find them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just so my colleagues know, we're going to go to Regent Kenyanya next and then Regent Hsu and Ms. Karandi. So Regent Kenyanya, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I just had a comment and I don't remember what the second one is, but it'll come to me as I speak. But first of all, want to thank and congratulate Dr. Delgado. Thank you for your service. Good luck, with the well-deserved opportunity, and thanks for putting up with me both as a student and now as a regent. But my question is, I'm really buying time here because
you forget your question
because I blanked. Okay, let me start with this. First of all, great stuff, and we really do have to acknowledge the areas that we're doing well. And I too was impressed with some of those numbers. I think. And this is so closely related to the previous conversation. The next level of data that we want to know, and maybe I'm taking Regent Rocha's comment, is how do we break down student of color further, right? And find how that very different group is, and identify some areas where we want to prioritize and invest. My question, and it worked, I bought time, it came back, was, obviously, the achievement gap doesn't start with, high school seniors being recruited to the university. And from a academic mission perspective, that is I suppose, where our responsibility and involvement starts. But I'm thinking maybe there's whether it's part of our land grant or outreach mission, I imagine there's a role for the university to be intervening somehow in the achievement gap earlier, right? And partnering with and just supporting what the high schools, the middle schools, the elementary schools are already doing, right? 4-H comes to mind, and I know there's a long list of that. Anyone, I'm not sure who this question's for, please talk a little bit more to that part, and how we can intervene with the achievement gap earlier, which I imagine will have better results than rather than later.
Regent Kenyanya, I had the same question in our agenda meeting, and I know that Provost Croson has the answer because she explained it very well to me about all doing with by training teachers and things like that. Go ahead, Regent Croson.
Awesome.
I'm not sure this is the answer, but it's a answer, and then I'm going to call on Vice Provost McMaster too. So, of course, our College of Education is deeply involved in outreach, in training teachers, in consulting with school districts that are facing similar problems. You mentioned, of course, 4-H and lots of other kinds of outreach programs that we run, that every campus run, that every college has run about kind of helping students to get through the pipeline. But at an institutional level, Vice Provost McMaster serves on the P20 Council. So maybe I'll let him, which is a statewide initiative, so maybe I'll let him talk about that.
All right, Vice Provost McMaster.
Sure, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, I'll be happy to. P20 Council is a somewhat unique entity among the states in that it's a collaboration among 4 entities. It's the Minnesota State System, it's the University of Minnesota, it's the K-12 system, and so the Commissioner of Education sits on it, and the Higher Ed Committee or Commission, and so the Commissioner of Higher Ed. And so this group, that's kind of an executive team, also includes dozens of other both education and higher education experts and officials. For instance, the high school superintendent group and the high school principal group and private entities that work in the K-12 world. And the whole idea behind P20 is to try to harmonize some of the relationships and have the higher ed committee be able to provide some expertise back to the K-12 system in terms of how to help close the achievement gaps. What are best practices? Nationally, what are best practices? What kinds of achievement gaps are we inheriting? How do you disaggregate those? So there's a whole kind of structure and set of questions that try to build bridges between the K-12 community and the higher ed community through this P20 Council. I could go on a long time, and I think I've probably gone on too long, but it's really an impressive organization for the state.
Does that help you, Regent Kenyanya?
It does, Mr. Chair. Can I add in one more?
Maybe.
Thank you. Quick question. I think this one's for Dr. Delgado. You talked about the MOOCs that that are offered to, if I understood it correctly, these are incoming first-year students. Is it feasible, or have we considered offering? Because that sounded like an optional additional, but I do know there are students who come in as conditional admits, right, and have to take certain courses before they can continue on with the regular coursework, and that already puts you a semester back, and something else doesn't work in your schedule, and the way prereqs work. Could we deliver some of that conditional coursework in the summer so that when fall comes, they start with their peers?
Executive Vice President or Chancellor Delgado.
Thank you, Regent Chair Anderson and Regent Kenyanya. And Mike, you had a role in getting me this job, so thank you. I remember meeting with you and your student association colleagues way back when. So you're to blame. So there. I mean, the reality, Michael, is that we could do anything. It's just a question of resources. And part of the challenge that we've had is to build out at least at Duluth, the resource base for transitional programs in an area where we've cut a lot of money. And as you well know, since the fiscal year 2017, what Academic Affairs has cut out just a little bit more than $7.5 million. And that's discretionary spending, basically, because we've tried to protect the academic programs. So, even the MOOC is done on a non-recurring basis. Every year I have to sort of scrape together the money along with the Dean of the College of Science and Engineering, and we fund that activity. And the faculty member who delivers it, frankly, does a lot of work out of Hyde. I'm not sure that we've compensated her at an appropriate level given the work that she's had to put into it. One of the things that we have been able to do with students transitioning in is to try to reduce some of the roadblocks while they're doing the courses. So some of the remedial courses we do offer, rather than they be semester long that you're locked into, we've gone to 5-week modules. And so we try to schedule them so they don't disrupt their learning. And if they get through module 1 and they get to a place where they feel confident, they don't have to go into module 2. So they're not locked into a 15-week, 3-week course, but a series of modules that they can step in and step out of during the course of the fall semester. It is possible we could do more in summer. It's always a challenge. And for us, much like Crookston and some of our other campuses, we're going to do it online. And so one of the wonderful features of a MOOC is you can reach a lot of people. The other thing is it's on a voluntary basis, and without having the face-to-face interaction and accountability, you do have a fair amount of bleed out, if you will, people who don't get all the way to the end. That doesn't mean that they don't necessarily benefit. They could get to a place where they have enough, but it is a challenge to make it a consistent offering that engages the student and sort of captures them for the time that we need them to successfully navigate a class.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a great answer. That gets to
Executive Vice Chancellor Delgado. I did not know of your move until it was announced by Provost Croson today. I just want to congratulate you. This is a good time to do that with Regent Kenyana's question. I would argue that as you move forward, you are ready for anything. If you are the guy that shepherded Regent Kenyana to a degree, and also dealt with him as a regent. So nothing will be new to you.
Depending who you ask, that might make him more questionable, seeing as he awarded you. But,
well, congratulations and good luck. Congratulations, good luck.
Thank you, Regent Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, presenters. Dr. Delgado, congratulations on your job. I hope you're not going to be commuting from Woodbury.
To the Bronx, no.
My question relates to that last Venn diagram about the Twin Cities retention. And I was just wondering if we could get that broken down so that we could maybe see what colleges, how they did in various colleges. And if there's any other data you can provide, such as long as we have ACT scores, let's look and see how ACTs predict retention. It might be something to look at. So thank you.
And I think that request can be taken care of. I see Vice Provost McMaster nodding his head. So that gets us to Student Representative Karandi. Welcome, and you have the floor, young lady.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the board, and those on live stream. First off, I just wanted to say Happy Black History Month. I want to take a moment to just honor Dr. Josie Johnson, who was the first African-American regent to ever serve on this board. So I wanted to take a moment to do that. So I have a few things I wanted to mention and get some response about. First off, while we can make every effort to really recruit students and make sure that their place in our university family is solidified, this usually happens throughout their collegiate journey. So I believe everyone here and President Lewis would agree that you want a happy student, but then you want a very satisfied alumni. And students spend a magnitude of their time in the classroom. So I want to know what is being done to really encourage and charge our faculty and staff to create welcoming environments in the classroom that are free of barriers and prejudice, because I believe those interactions actually hold a really strong place in the retention of our students.
Provost Croson, do you want to either try to answer that or give it to somebody who you believe can?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So This session is really focused on students, undergraduate and graduate students. Our May session is going to be focused on faculty with a special eye for diversity there, so we can certainly talk about it there. I will add, with the launch of the Go for Equity project, having been, we wanted to make sure that was going to be successful, Vice President Go is in discussions around similar kind of training that would be available and perhaps even mandatory for instructors and staff. So that's not, that's still far early days at this stage, but it's absolutely something that's under discussion.
Thank you. Ms. Grandy, is there more?
Yes, there is. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Provost Carson. So then I'm assuming you'll get into maybe more about the recruitment and retention of our diverse, racially and ethnically diverse faculty then. Okay, perfect. And so the last thing I just wanted to say was I'd really like to see this explored in the lens of tenure as well. It's important to communicate these said values in a concrete manner, and understandably so, faculty and staff are very busy individuals with very competing priorities. So I would really appreciate if this board and our university really encourage some of these values through the process of tenure and ways in which our faculty would be assessed. And so the final thing I just want to say is, our university frames this as the achievement gap, but I also would like to notice that this is often coined also as the opportunity gap, because achievement often discusses how there's these metrics that put the responsibility on the student or the individual rather than the systems that exist that tend to create this divide. So as we move forward and kind of in academia, I'd really appreciate our university also refer to this more as an opportunity gap rather than the achievement that we have with our students. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Terrific. That's a good point. That's a very, very good point. I see no more hands up, so we're going to close session 2. And on session 3 on our agenda, or item 3, I see Vice Provost Scott Lannion's name, so that tells me we're going to be talking about graduate education. And our third item continues on the diversity theme, it says here, but addresses graduate education specifically, so I was correct. Scott Lannion, Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Education, and Yoji Shimizu, the Associate Dean for Graduate Education, will lead us in this discussion topic. Provost Croson, do you once again want to lead us off and touch with it?
Yes, please. Thank you. Chair Anderson, members of the committee. This presentation continues the arc so presciently outlined by Regent Her in advancing diversity and student success in graduate education. An important purpose of graduate education is to train the next generation of faculty. And I'm proud to note that we're at the forefront of developing high-achieving and diverse faculty. Our graduate students also pursue jobs in the private sector, where diverse participation is equally as important and sought after. Graduate education exists on our Twin Cities and Duluth campus, along with one PhD program delivered in Rochester in partnership with the Twin Cities. Not considered in today's presentation are the many professional degree programs, although I assure you that diversity, equity, and inclusion are as much a priority there as well. We've chosen to focus on graduate education today, given the time and other constraints, the very decentralized nature of professional education in contrast to graduate and undergraduate, and the fact that programs such as law and medicine have come to the board independently as specific agenda items. Our presenters are Scott Lannion and Yoji Shimizu. Dr. Lannion is Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Education. He came to the university in 1995 as a professor in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Behavior, where he subsequently served as chair. His research is in the field of avian systematics, I hope I got that right, where he and his colleagues use DNA sequence data to develop an understanding of the evolutionary relationship between families and species of birds. Dr. Shimizu is Associate Dean for Graduate Education and Director of the Graduate School's Diversity Office. He is also a distinguished university teaching professor in the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology. His research is focused on trying to understand how immune responses are generated and how that information can be used in the clinic to improve patient care. Chair Anderson, with your approval, I would ask Vice Provost and Dean Lannion to begin.
I'm fine with that. They have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, Provost Croson, members of the committee. We're really happy to have this opportunity to talk about diversity and inclusion in graduate education. The Graduate School's strategic plan identifies increasing the diversity of students receiving graduate degrees as our highest priority. So the Graduate School priority really aligns well with the new system-wide strategic plan and Impact 2025 goal of recruiting and retaining diverse talent. And there are two action items that were identified to advance that strategic goal, focusing attention on two phases of increasing diversity, recruitment and retention. To start, I'm going to have Dr. Yoshi Shimizu, our Associate Dean of Grad Ed and Director of the Grad School's Diversity Office, provide a quick overview of our recruitment and retention trends and the actions that the Graduate School is taking to improve those trends. Yoshi, and if we can have the next slide, please.
Chair and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to be with you today, and thank you, Scott. We'll begin with this slide, which really sets the stage for where we are with regard to graduate enrollment at the University of Minnesota. A little over a third of our graduate students are international, but in this presentation, we want to focus primarily on where we are with respect to the diversity of domestic graduate students. About half of our graduate students are domestic white students, and about 15% of our graduate students are BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see from this graph that over the last 10 years, the percentage of our applications, offers of admission, and newly enrolled graduate students has increased over 5%. So we are making progress, but there, as always, remains room for improvement. Next slide, please. Unlike undergraduate admissions, the decisions regarding graduate admissions are made primarily at the level of individual graduate programs, often with coordination by the college. Therefore, the graduate school's role has been to assist programs in their efforts to attract more applications from underrepresented populations and to offer additional resources to programs to assist them in these recruiting efforts. One example is we actively participate and attend national undergraduate conferences, such as the SACNAS National Conference, Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And we coordinate our participation with graduate programs that attend that conference as well in order to maximize our impact. These types of large national conferences allow us to meet a large number of prospective students from across the country and provide them with information about the outstanding opportunities for pursuing graduate education at Minnesota. Now, we also have many outstanding undergraduate students from underrepresented groups right here in our own system. And we certainly want them to consider staying here at Minnesota if they are interested in pursuing a graduate degree. And to reach these students, the University of Minnesota System-Wide Diversity Conference and Fair is a new graduate school initiative that offers current University of Minnesota undergraduate students at all of our campuses with an opportunity to explore the possibilities of what a graduate education can provide for their future academic and career goals. And these students also have the opportunity to meet with graduate program representatives. Now, there is I think a common misconception among undergraduate students or prospective graduate students that becoming a faculty member is the only career path for someone working, for example, towards a PhD. And studies have shown that BIPOC students are known to be less interested in faculty careers than white students. So in order to provide more accurate information about the exciting and diverse career paths that are being pursued by graduate students, former Regent Abdul Amari was, in fact, our first keynote speaker at the first inaugural U of M System-Wide Diversity Conference and Fair. And he spoke specifically to attendees about the fact that there are many exciting career pathways that can be pursued with the completion of a graduate degree. If you could advance the slide, please. Successful recruitment of graduate students, particularly from underrepresented groups, requires that we provide nationally competitive recruitment fellowships. And the graduate school provides first-year fellowships on a competitive basis to graduate programs. And we also provide funding directly to colleges to support their diversity recruitment efforts. Could you advance the slide again, please? We also host visitation events. So these are events where students from the National McNair Scholars Program visit the University of Minnesota and have an opportunity to meet our faculty, our current graduate students, and to tour our campus. Could you advance the slide again? And then finally, we provide to graduate programs large national databases with students from diverse backgrounds who are interested in obtaining a graduate degree. And we provide a lot of consultation with those programs to provide best practices for the successful recruitment of diverse students. Next slide, please. Now, the second action item to accomplish the Impact 2025 goal of recruiting and retaining diversity talent is to see an increase in year-over-year retention rates. In graduate education, that's best done by looking at the percentage of students in each entering cohort who are still enrolled in their graduate program or have received their graduate degree. Now, because the BIPOC population is smaller than the white student population, there's some considerable year-to-year variation for the BIPOC retention rate, but you can see that the trends are generally similar with higher retention across both populations in recent years. Next slide, please. Now, to enhance retention rates, the graduate school directly supports graduate students from diverse backgrounds to enhance community, to create a sense of belonging, and to help develop key career skills. The Community of Scholars is a nationally award-winning program in the graduate school that supports the academic and professional success of BIPOC students across the university. The Community of Scholars program builds a strong sense of community through an extensive array of activities and helps develop supportive relationships with academic advisors and mentors. Our writing initiative develops the writing skills of graduate students from diverse backgrounds with group writing sessions, writing consultations, and writing retreats. You can advance the slide. Second, recognition of graduate student leadership and success also enhances the retention of graduate students from diverse backgrounds. The Graduate Seed Award program recognizes students whose research and scholarly interests are focused on issues of equity, diversity, or social justice. And in response to COVID-19, we have provided an opportunity for graduate student assistants to work in the Office for Equity and Diversity in order to advance the office's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And we also established a new fellowship program to recognize graduate students who have demonstrated a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and our social justice through their scholarly activity and our climate enhancing initiatives, and where the financial support for their research has been impacted by the pandemic. Advance the next slide, please. And having an inclusive, equitable, and supportive climate is particularly critical for the retention of graduate students from diverse backgrounds. The graduate school works directly with faculty and staff in our graduate programs by providing direct consultation support to help our graduate programs improve climate. And it's important to note that an important part of having an inclusive and equitable climate in graduate education includes efforts that are intentional in reducing what we would call bad or unnecessary stress. The graduate school assists graduate programs in implementing a number of really important best practices. These include the development by our faculty of advising statements that clearly outline their expectations to graduate students, the use of an individual development plan for graduate student career planning, supporting graduate students that they pursue professional development opportunities and a variety of career paths, both academic and non-academic, advocating for students to develop a network of mentors for professional development and guidance, and the development by graduate programs of key educational goals. So I'll turn this back over to Dean Lanyon, who will talk about our graduate student climate survey information.
Thank you very much. As you've just heard, our goals in retention and graduation, if I could have the next slide, please. Our goals in retention and graduation of diverse students really depend on a welcoming and inclusive climate. And this too is reflected in the system-wide strategic plan. One of the goals for Commitment 4 is to cultivate a welcoming and inclusive campus climate. And the action item associated with that goal is to measure and address annual climate survey data. Well, fortunately, the University of Minnesota is actually a national leader in conducting a comprehensive survey of graduate student experiences. Student perception of campus and program climate figure prominently in that survey effort. And while there are many questions regarding climate in the survey, for simplicity, I'm just going to show you the results from just one of those climate questions. And I should note that these results are from our 2019 survey. We'll be doing it again this spring. And in 2019, we had 42% of our graduate students complete the survey. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the percent of responding students who reported that the overall environment or climate of their graduate program was positive and welcoming. So I just wanted to start there with the good news that the vast majority of our graduate students, 88%, are positive about the climate that they've experienced at the University of Minnesota. However, that's a summary of the responses of all University of Minnesota system graduate students, and it's strongly influenced by majority students. For today's discussion, it's important that we know if different identity groups have different perspectives about climate. Next slide, please. So in this slide, same question. You can see that the responses of domestic students vary somewhat between students of color and white students. While a high percentage of both groups have had favorable experiences with climate, students of color are somewhat less positive than white students. However, this is still at the system level, and as Regent Rocha mentioned earlier, aggregate data tends to obscure important patterns. And in graduate education, probably more so than in undergraduate, in graduate education, students spend the majority of their time with the faculty, staff, and students of their program. So there's a possibility that students in different programs, these different relatively isolated communities, might have different experiences. Therefore, we want to know what the situation is at the level of individual graduate programs. While most institutions only have climate data at the system or campus level, as you see in this slide, the University of Minnesota has stressed the importance of understanding graduate student experiences at the level of individual programs. Next slide, please. So here we again have the same question that I've been showing you, but now I'm showing you the results from 5 of our graduate programs. And this shows just how variable student perception of climate can be within the University of Minnesota. For example, students in program 1 were very positive about the climate, both students of color and white students, whereas the students in program 5 were generally not. Again, true for both students of color and white students. More importantly, for the purposes of today's discussion, the extent to which domestic students of color and white students agree regarding their perception of climate also can vary dramatically. Again, while both groups had similar perceptions of climate in program 1, consider the situation in program 4. Nearly 3/4 of white students in that program thought that their program's climate was positive and welcoming, while less than half of the students of color agreed. I've just shown you the breakout of identity groups, students of color versus white students. The results are pretty similar if you look at LGBTQ plus students versus straight students, or between cisgender and non-cisgender students, different identity groups. We now have the opportunity, as long as we have good response rates, to be able to start looking at this at the program level. Next slide, please. So in summary, the graduate school's strategic priority is increasing the diversity of students receiving graduate degrees, and we believe that if we achieve that goal, we will better serve prospective students, we will better serve employers of our graduates, and we're convinced that the University of Minnesota scholarship generally will be better. Scholarship is better, more creative, the more diverse are the people who are conducting that scholarship. Now, in recent years, the University of Minnesota has made progress, as you heard, in both recruitment and retention of graduate students from underrepresented populations. And as Dr. Shimizu presented, we have a variety of initiatives to continue that trend. But in concluding, I'd really like to highlight one of those initiatives specifically, the system-wide recruiting fair. We know that many students from underrepresented communities are more likely to pursue a graduate degree if they can do so close to their home and their community. The desire or need to stay close to home has become even more pronounced during this pandemic. And we think our recruiting fair has the potential to be a key element in our diversity recruiting efforts, and we welcome the board's thoughts about ways to expand this effort in the years to come. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that one of the major hurdles that we face in achieving our goal of increasing the diversity of students receiving graduate degrees, one of the major hurdles is the relatively low diversity of our faculty. Increasing the diversity of our faculty would, we believe, have a significant positive impact on our ability to recruit, retain, and graduate students from underrepresented populations. And I believe Vice Provost Ropers will be talking about faculty diversity at an upcoming meeting of the Board of Regents. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to thank you, Chair Anderson, for this opportunity to talk about diversity in graduate education, and thank you for your service to the University of Minnesota. I'd like to now turn the presentation back over to Provost Croson.
So again, my thanks to the presenters, and we are open to chair and board's questions.
I think Dean Lanyon answered my question when I was just thinking, the more diverse, it starts with the graduate students, but the more diverse graduate students have, lead to more diverse faculty, lead to the ability to recruit a more diverse student body. Is that a fair transitive property if I go back to my math?
Yes, it is. I need to highlight that typically institutions don't hire their own graduate students into their faculty. So
Correct.
When we create a diverse graduate students, we're sort of sending them out into the world, and then we are hiring graduate students from other institutions. But we are absolutely part of that ecosystem, and we think that's an important role for us.
Okay, thank you. Regent Hsu, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I have a related question to kind of what you guys were just talking about. If our faculty are not very diverse, that must have an impact on all of these surveys that you're doing. So if you're trying to figure out what's going on with our non-diverse faculty, I'm not sure how much of an impact. I mean, I would guess there would be an impact if we had a more diverse faculty. Do we know anything about that? How much we have to move the needle in order to change all these other surveys that you're doing?
So I'm gonna sort of put that question a little bit on hold until May, because Vice Provost Ropers will bring in some not only data on the diversity of our faculty, but also the initiatives that we're undertaking. But I also want to harken back to Representative Karandi's point about making sure that even faculty who are non-diverse are trained and open and sensitive is important as well. I think those are both two important tools.
Thank you. Regent Hsu, anything more?
Well, I would just say that I'm interested in some numbers of the different groups of faculty that we have, and maybe a breakdown by college. And I think if we try to do this at the macro level without looking at what's happening at the colleges, then we're kind of, we're kind of not going to solve the problem anytime soon, because we don't know how diverse each of the colleges is. So, I would like to know what is the most diverse college that we have in terms of faculty, as opposed to the least. So,
Does anybody know that offhand? No.
But I'll be patient and wait till May. Thank you.
Okay. Regent Powell, your hand is up.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Just two quick ones, and thank you for the presentation and for the encouraging progress. Just a couple of quick ones. Interested in understanding for the U.S.-based students, the percentage that are recruited from outside of Minnesota. I'm assuming that this is a very geographically dispersed group of students from around the country, but would be interested in the data on that. And then secondly, just curious about the job, and kind of placement outcomes for our graduate students. How well do they do out there in the marketplace?
What?
I'm going to let Dean Lanyon take that one.
Okay, Dean Lanyon.
So thank you very much for the question. I think that let me start with the alumni. This has become a focus for the graduate school. And again, it ties back to one of the action items in the system-wide strategic plan. We are aware that our students in general are doing really, really well. It's much more diverse than a lot of people think in terms of the career paths. I think we frequently hear in various publications that there are relatively few jobs for PhD students. And the reason is people are only thinking perhaps about the professoriate, and that the need for faculty waxes and wanes over time. And we are certainly producing more PhDs, than there are faculty openings nationally, but only about half of our graduate students are interested in pursuing a faculty career anyway. Our graduate students are doing all kinds of things with their graduate degrees and are very successful in doing so. And they're using, as far as we know, they're training in those career paths. But those are really things that we want to pursue more in the years to come, to really understand how well we're serving our graduates and the various career paths they're taking.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Regent Mayron.
Yes, thank you very much. Referring to one of the last slides that was shown to us, this is the one where it was broken out in terms of the programs 1 through 5. And with program 1 showing whatever that particular program is, that students of color and white students were pretty happy with the climate that they were experiencing, down to program 5 where both students of color and white students seemed, I'm just paraphrasing, but fairly unhappy with the overall environment or climate of their program. And so my question is, what are we doing to, number one, understand the differences between these various programs, for example, 1 and 5, and then we look at program 4, where there's quite a disparity between students of color and white students, and then to address these disparities between students of color and white students in these various programs. So what are we doing then with the information to address the differences? Because I do think breaking it down by program is critical and is much more informative than looking at a system-wide number.
Dean Lanyon, do you have an answer?
Chair Anderson, Regent Mayron, I really appreciate the question. And I just want to go back to your final point of saying it's really important that we have this data at the program level, because that's where we can affect change. So I couldn't agree more. So I mentioned in the presentation that this is just a single question. This is a very extensive survey, and not just about climate, but about their students' experiences with their advisor, their health and well-being, their professional aspirations, and so on. All of that information helps us to better understand this particular data point that I just mentioned to you. So to try to get at what's different between these programs, what's different between identity groups and their experiences. The fact that we now have that information, and more importantly, that programs have that information, means that the programs can and are taking steps to address these concerns that largely they were unaware of until we started doing this survey. Often what that turns into is the program approaching the Graduate School Diversity Office for consultations and for advice on best practices. And we are happy to participate in that, as is, of course, the Office of Equity and Diversity. So, but the most important point to recognize is that the reason there's a disparity in different programs differs across programs. And the ways in which we can address it also are best done differently for different programs. So it's so critical that we have the information at this level and can work at that program level.
Just if I could ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, no problem.
Regent Anderson, and that is, I understand that it sounds like, and this was a good practice, that the different programs are approaching the diversity office or the system resources. Are there opportunities for programs to share their best practices or worst practices with each other so that they can learn from each other on what has worked and what has not worked?
Dean Lanyon?
Yes, absolutely. This is, we meet, so every graduate program has a faculty member who's designated as the Director of Graduate Studies. Basically, it's another set of responsibilities on top of everything else that we have faculty doing. And the graduate school meets monthly, regularly, I think it's monthly now, with the directors of graduate studies. And one of the things we're trying to do is tee up particular conversations. Let's say How do people do the prelim exam? What are the practices people are using on admissions? How are people doing annual review of students? And basically we select some programs that we believe are have implemented some best practices, but it's really an opportunity for people to share, because what's really amazing is how different graduate education is across all of our disciplines. And programs that, just as you said, have come up with some great solutions, but it's an isolation in one program. And we're now really trying to make sure that there's an opportunity for programs to share what they've learned and what they've come up with.
Okay. Regent Her.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My comments is that, well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I like what I saw, but I am missing some stuff that would give me a better understanding of what's happening with diversity and inclusion in graduate education. One is I would like to see more demographics as to and within the schools of the breakdown of race, gender, and I'm curious as to fellowships, if that can be broken down into race and gender, and also who's involved with research, if that's broken down in terms of the students that are involved in research. I know that we were talking about a goal of getting students, or almost every student, into research if we could, and at the graduate level where research in the fields where research is really, really important. Are students of color engaged in that? Are they active in that? And are they involved to the level that they should be? Thank you.
Dean Lanning.
So the graduate school, as Provost Croson mentioned, we're overseeing all of the research masters and the PhD programs. So all of our students are heavily engaged in research. That's the nature of their time here. Yes, they're taking courses, but the thing that they're really focusing on is creating new knowledge through their research. So all of our students are involved in that respect. Back to your question about sort of more detail on demographics, we have that, and information and programs have access to that information up to a point. And that is that we don't share data unless there are at least 5 responses for whatever sort of breakdown we're trying to do. So we would love to be able to report on whether Asian female graduate students in a particular program have a different experience. We can only do that if we had at least 5 such students respond to the survey. And that's critical in graduate education, at least, because there is a real power differential between faculty and graduate students. And we really need to make sure that our students who are taking these surveys are protected from any sort of negative consequences. So we're very cautious about sort of cell size, if you will. However, we can report and do report at the college level. So we can provide information about finer intersections of identity groups at the college or campus level. The problem is we know that change happens best at the program level. So we really, I mean, this is a plea that we make every time we do the survey. We need everybody to complete the survey. The higher the response rate, the more likely it is that we will have information at the program level where we can affect change. I hope that answers your question.
It does, but I'm also concerned that if we don't have the starting point data, then how do we know that we're making progress, and how do we hold programs accountable to making progress if we don't have a starting point?
Correct.
Kind of a catch-22 you've got there. Answer the question, Regent Her.
Yes, thank you.
I see no more hands up. If that is truly the case, I want to thank the presenters And it's been a great afternoon on everything we've learned about the diversity of our universities, our system and main campuses on different levels. With that said, I know that's going to bring us to our consent report, which I do not have right in front of me, but I know there's a couple things on there. I think I'll ask Provost Croson to provide introduction to it. And if anybody has a question or comment on the consent report, take a look and put your hand up and we'll discuss it before we vote. Go ahead, Provost Croson.
Great. Thank you, Chair Anderson. The February consent report is before you, which includes 4 items for your approval. The first is a request for approval for new and changed programs. This includes 3 undergraduate minors and an undergraduate credit certificate. The second item in the consent report seeks approval for 3 faculty appointments with tenure. A third item in today's consent report is for the approval of post-secondary planning, a joint report to the Minnesota legislature, and I'll say a moment about this. This report is authored jointly by the University of Minnesota and Minnesota State as required by the state. This is the 10th iteration of this report, which responds to the topics requested by the Minnesota legislature and reflects the extensive and ongoing collaboration between the 2 public systems that provide higher education in Minnesota. The final item in today's consent report is for the approval of museum accessioning and deaccessioning policies. The Board of Regents policy requires each museum or gallery to develop and maintain policies for accessioning and deaccessioning permanent collections. These policies and any amendments require board approval. Through the consulting process for the regular comprehensive review of board policy, it was not clear if all the existing policies had been recently reviewed by the board, or if recent amendments that had been made, or if there were recent amendments that had been made but not yet approved. So this item collects all of the policies and brings them before you for approval all at once. Chair Anderson, I recommend the consent report for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. That reminded me of everything that was on there. I've read through it all. And the legislative report is actually quite extensive, but do I have a motion to approve the consent report?
So
Move to approve.
And obviously there was a second in there. Does somebody want to just officially second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if anybody has questions or wants to pull something out. I do not see anybody with any objections. Ms. Flatten, do you see anything on your side?
Mr. Chair, I do not.
So is there any discussion? I don't believe there is. No additional comments. Ms. Flatten, will you call the roll?
On the Mission Fulfillment Committee consent report, Regent Beeson.
Yes.
Regent Beeson votes yes. Regent Davenport.
Yes.
Regent Davenport votes yes. Regent Herr.
Yes.
Regent Herr votes yes. Regent Hsu.
yes.
Regent Hsu votes yes. Regent Kenyanya.
Yes.
Regent Kenyanya votes yes. Regent Mayron.
Yes.
Regent Mayron votes yes. Regent McMillan.
Yes.
Regent McMillan votes yes. Regent Powell.
Yes.
Regent Powell votes yes. Regent Rocha.
Yes.
Regent Rocha votes yes. Regent Simonson.
Yes.
Regent Simonson votes yes. Regent Swigum.
Yes.
Regent Swigum votes yes. Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Chair Anderson votes yes. Mr. Chair, there are 12 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you, Ms. Flatten. The motion, the consent report passes. That brings us to our final item, information items. Provost Croson, is there anything you'd like to add about those for the good of the group?
Thank you, yes. So the first piece among the February information items is our regular report of select student, faculty, and staff accomplishments, including awards, grants, and continuing contributions to our local, national, and global communities. I'll mention 3 that are particularly notable. You may have seen in the recent press release that the university has received a $5 million grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. This award will support collaborations with Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and refugee communities to amplify historical interpretations, create new narratives and dialogues, foster community well-being, and inform policy responses. This initiative will engage over a dozen community partners and will create projects focused on language revitalization, storytelling, and media, including a historic report on tribal university relations. CSE Professor Hyung-Soo Park will lead research supported by the Toyota Research Institute. Professor Park and his colleagues will be conducting work that will focus on enabling the measurement, analysis, and prediction of the behaviors of drivers and passengers to create safe driving. Rosemary Leslie, Chief Family Medicine Resident Physician, has emerged as a well-known TikToker who creates videos on health education targeted at adolescents. In addition, there are 3 recent reports included in the information items for your information: the Barnes Advisory Council on Rare Diseases report, the Regenerative Medicine Minnesota report to the Minnesota Legislature, and the Agriculture and Extension report to the Minnesota Legislature. I know that the mission fulfillment docket was particularly thick this month. If you haven't had time to read these wonderful materials, I highly recommend them. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you. Thanks for a great meeting, everyone. Regent Sviggum, do we have a score in the basketball game? He's definitely watching it. There being no additional business before the committee, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Regent Anderson, the score